Okay. Well, sorry for the delay. David Worley actually is here in attendance. He was a little delayed because he was helping someone out in a car wreck. So that's the kind of guy he is. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Jake Wyman with the Idaho Freedom Foundation. Welcome to Capital Clarity. Today's topic, religious freedom. No Christians in command. This was the core policy that led to Major David Worley, a longtime resident of Idaho, being removed from his position in command within the Idaho National Guard. This policy was created by the National Guard itself, and his removal was signed off by Governor Brad Little after deeming Major Worley's views to be too extreme. What positions did Major Worley hold that were too extreme? While campaigning for mayor of Pocatello, he expressed opposition to obscene material aimed at children in our public libraries, including pornography and drag queen story hours. He also opposed medical mutilation of gender-confused children, a topic the IFF has also opposed when Chloe Cole, victim of this practice, spoke at Capital Clarity in 2023. Both of these issues have since been banned by our legislature, with both bills signed by our governor. Despite this, Governor Little showed his true colors by still finding Major Worley guilty and having him removed. The good news is Major Worley is fighting back on behalf of all Christian Idahoans and suing those that violated his religious freedom. He is joined by the Liberty Counsel, a Christian ministry that engages in strategic litigation to promote traditional Christian values. Major Worley is in attendance with us today, but due to this being an ongoing lawsuit, a representative of the Liberty Counsel, Stephen Smith, is here to tell Major David Worley's story. Stephen Smith has been practicing Idaho attorney for the past 47 years. He resides in Sandpoint and is currently providing volunteer support in constitutional law and religious freedom matters as an allied affiliate attorney with the Liberty Counsel. Stephen is also chairman of the Christian Faith and Freedom Coalition, an Idaho nonprofit organization which honors veterans and provides education about the U.S. Constitution. Please welcome Stephen Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here. I'm from Sandpoint. I didn't really expect you to have snow just to make me feel at home, but I really appreciate it. That was just a nice touch. Jake said I'm supposed to just slide this on here and away we go. Okay. So, on behalf of Major David Worley and Liberty Counsel, I would just like to thank you for investing about an hour of your time here to learn about the case involving David Worley. And as you heard, he was removed from his command because he spoke in his private capacity prior to becoming what he was removed from, and doing it in the political realm and as a Christian who wanted to just stand for what was right to protect against immorality and also to promote morality for Idaho youth. So as we begin this afternoon, I'd like to introduce you first to the law firm that is representing Major Worley. Liberty Counsel is a national nonprofit litigation, education, and public policy organization with an emphasis on First Amendment liberties. Liberty Counsel's primary areas of focus are upon religious freedom, sanctity of human life, and the family. Liberty Counsel proclaims, advocates, supports, advances, and defends the good news that God, in the person of Jesus Christ, paid the penalty for our sins and offers forgiveness and eternal life to all who accept Him as Lord and Savior. I was blessed. I came through the upper part of the Capitol, and apparently this is a faith emphasis day, and I'm thankful we can do that still. Every ministry and project of Liberty Counsel centers around and is based upon this good news, which is also referred to as the gospel. Liberty Counsel's mission statement is restoring the culture by advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, and the family. Founded in 1989, Liberty Counsel maintains offices in Florida, Virginia, and Washington, D.C., and is funded by tax-deductible donations from individuals, businesses, foundations, and other organizations. I'm an affiliate with Liberty Counsel based here in Idaho. Now I'd like to move on to introduce you to what makes Major Worley's case against the Idaho National Guard and Governor important. It's my understanding that some of you may be legislators here with us today, and I just would like to, first of all, speak to legislators. I believe that they have made many sacrifices to be elected to their positions because they love people and they want those people to enjoy the freedoms that our founding fathers made sure were guaranteed in the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. In the same way, the servicemen and women of America have made many sacrifices to qualify and train for their military assignments because they too love people and want them to have their freedoms protected. Which brings us to the question, why is Major Worley's case important? And the following are two quotes that I think can answer this question. The first quote is found in the Bible in the Gospel of John chapter 15, in which Jesus said the following in verses 12 and 13. "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, than a man lay down his life for his friends." And that's what our military does every day. As a veteran of the United States military, Major Worley has on numerous occasions put his life on the line for you and me to protect our freedoms. The second quote that answers the question of why is Major Worley's case important is found in an article published February 4th, 2025, online in what's called The Stream. In that article, Daniel Schmid, who is the lead attorney of Major Worley's Liberty Counsel legal team, wrote the following. "As much as the current military establishment hates to admit it, soldiers don't shed their constitutional rights at the recruiter's office upon enlistment. In fact, the Constitution provides the same fundamental protections for those who swore an oath to defend it as it does to those of us who sleep under the shelter of protection those soldiers provide." So no freedom-loving American wants to put a soldier of the high caliber of Major Worley in the predicament of having to choose between fulfilling his calling of being a soldier, protecting freedom, and being a Christian holding true to his traditional biblical beliefs. So as we dive into Major Worley's case, it's fitting that we're in the meeting auditorium named in honor of President Abraham Lincoln, whom we still honor today as being one of the best examples of a freedom-loving American. It's also fitting to recall what he said about having the right perspective. He was asked about the Civil War and, on whose side was God. And this is what Abraham Lincoln said to the fellow who asked him. He said, "Sir, my concern is not whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right." So as you learn about Major Worley's case, I hope that you will see that the perspective and goal of both he and his legal team is, as Abraham Lincoln said, to be on God's side. So we're going to try to unpack Major Worley's case with the 5 W's of good reporting here. So this is the case of Worley versus Little, which is a federal district court case. So let's start with who is Major David Worley. My lovely wife and I have this running joke about the fact that guys never get to really know people well because they don't ask good questions. So I asked her to give me some good questions that I could find out more about David Worley. And so with the benefit of her good questions, this is what I found out about Major Worley. He was born in Pocatello, Idaho. His family has been in Idaho for 5 generations. He received a bachelor's degree in political science from George Mason University and a master's degree in national security affairs from the Institute of World Politics. Despite being raised in a religious home, he didn't really become a believer in Christ until he was 21. The epistles of Paul in the Bible convinced him of the reality and the gravity of his sins. He was convinced by the scriptures that he would suffer eternal damnation if he did not repent and seek forgiveness through the atoning blood of Jesus Christ. He sought forgiveness through prayer, and from that point forward, Jesus became his Savior, Lord, and King. He and his wife met at Pocatello High School and have been married 16 years. They have 5 children. The oldest is 14 and the youngest is 6. Major Worley was sold on joining the military when he got his first pack of plastic green army men. He has wanted to be a soldier as long as he can remember. As he got older, his desire to join the military fused with a deep patriotism and love for the American founding era, so he joined the Idaho National Guard after high school. He's been a member of the Army National Guard for 22 years. He's been deployed 3 times in the Middle East, including 2 tours to Iraq. He was deployed twice as an infantry officer and once as an enlisted soldier. The most important event in his life was his conversion to Christ. It changed his life and has impacted the course of his life in every sphere and duty. The most important thing to him right now is ensuring that his children can flourish while living Christian lives. And he believes that his case is important because it exposes systemic problems. In his case, 4 general military officers supported this religious discrimination that he has suffered. His case, along with others throughout the nation, show that anti-Christian bias has become acceptable in the military. So another who in our review of this case is, who are the parties in the Worley versus Little Idaho Federal District Court case? So the plaintiff is Major Worley in his capacity as a major in the Idaho Army National Guard. One of the defendants is Brad Little, the governor of the state of Idaho and commander-in-chief of the Idaho National Guard. He's being sued in his official capacity. Another defendant is Major Timothy J. Donnellan, who is the adjutant general and commanding general of the Idaho National Guard, being sued in his official capacity, and also defendant Brigadier General James C. Packwood. He's the assistant adjutant general of the Idaho Army National Guard, and he's also being sued in his official capacity. So we move from the first W of who to the second W of where. Let's find out a little bit about where things happened here. So Major Worley's hometown is Pocatello, Idaho. In 2021, he ran for mayor of the city of Pocatello. In 2022, Major Worley ran for the Idaho State Senate in District 29. In July of 2023, Major Worley took command of the Idaho Army National Guard's recruiting and retention unit headquartered in Pocatello. Shortly thereafter, again in July of 2023, Major Worley was removed from his command in Pocatello while the investigation was undertaken and the administrative disciplinary proceedings were being concluded. Major Worley has been deprived of a duty position, duty assignments, and responsibility. He is not allowed to drill with any unit. He's ostracized from the military, and his career has been rendered stagnant since July of 2023. In order to provide for his family, Major Worley obtained a job as a private security patrol person in Pocatello. Subsequently, in 2024, again in Pocatello, Major Worley was commended for his bravery and heroism as he stopped a criminal who was beating a woman in an intersection in Pocatello. In that incident, Major Worley was driving through his hometown on the way home from work and witnessed a violent criminal publicly beating a woman in an intersection. He immediately pulled his vehicle over, quickly exited, and intervened to rescue the woman from the man's criminal assault. Major Worley held the attacker captive while waiting for police to arrive, and the police arrested the suspect upon arrival. Major Worley's actions were recognized by the Pocatello Police Department, and he was given an award for his service as a citizen. So let's just stop a moment here, and let's think of, who do we want in our military? So if you look at the fact that he immediately assessed the situation of danger, he immediately injected himself into that situation, he exercised good, controlled judgment. He recognized that there was a credible threat of harm, and he caused it to cease, and he held the person captive until law enforcement arrived. Now, to me, that's a guy who is using his head, and that's the kind of guy that we would want in a recruiting and retention battalion. We're going to showcase people who are good soldiers in that kind of setting, and Major Worley is a good soldier. So let's move to the third W, which is the what about Major Worley's case. So let's just take a quick look at the primary constitutional issues that are presented in the case. The complaint alleges a total of 5 different claims. The first 2 are violation and retaliation in violation of the free speech clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution as applied to the states by the 14th Amendment. So that set of amendments there is intended to prohibit the defendants in this case from abridging Major Worley's freedom of speech. A third claim is a violation of the free exercise of religion clause of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, and that amendment is intended to prohibit the government from abridging Major Worley's rights to free exercise of his religious beliefs. The fourth claim is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. That one is intended to guarantee Major Worley the right to equal protection under the law. And then the fifth claim is a violation of Idaho's own Free Exercise of Religion Protection Act. That's in Idaho Code Section 73-402. And that's intended to establish that the free exercise of religion is a fundamental right that applies in the state of Idaho, even if laws, rules, or other government actions appear on their face to be neutral toward religion. It's kind of the super statute when it comes to religious freedom, and we've got one. So let's take also a look at the what here. What's the primary relief that Major Worley is seeking in his case? The answer to that question is that he's seeking first immediate temporary legal relief, and secondly, he's seeking longer-range permanent legal relief. First, as to the immediate temporary legal relief in his case against the Idaho National Guard and the governor, Major Worley is seeking a temporary restraining order, also known as a TRO, which is to prevent immediate harm, and then also a preliminary injunction, which is intended to preserve the status quo, to basically put him back in his job so that he can function in that capacity. The purpose of the temporary relief is to prevent the National Guard from throwing Major Worley out of the military and to restore Major Worley to his command while the case is adjudicated in the Idaho Federal District Court, and that would preserve the status quo between the parties until the court can hear and decide the case on its merit. That temporary request is pending at this point. And absent a TRO and a preliminary injunction, Major Worley will be unceremoniously, unconstitutionally, and unlawfully removed from his position permanently and separated from the active duty force of the Idaho Army National Guard and potentially separated from the military entirely and permanently because of the mere exercise of his constitutionally protected rights to religion and free speech. The First Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the Idaho Free Exercise of Religion Protection Act all demand more, and a TRO is necessary to preserve Major Worley's sincerely held and constitutionally perfected religious beliefs, views, and expression from irreparable harm and return him to the position that he held prior to this unconstitutional discrimination against him. Secondly, as to the longer-range permanent legal relief against the Idaho National Guard and governor, Major Worley is seeking, in addition to recovery of his actual damages and attorney's fees, an enforceable declaratory judgment that the defendant's no Christian in command policy is unconstitutional and may not be enforced in the Idaho National Guard. So what are some, another what here, what are some potential legislative approaches to the problems underlying this case? One of those is the Idaho House or Senate could exercise committee oversight. An Idaho Legislative Committee could open an official investigation during the pendency of this lawsuit. And as an aside, Liberty Counsel's COVID vaccine litigation informed members of Congress on the issue at play, and Congress exercised that kind of oversight. The Idaho legislature could do the same here, starting with an invitation to Brigadier General Packwood to appear and testify, and to Major Worley to appear and testify, both in their official capacities. A second consideration for the Idaho legislature would be that Idaho legislation could be drafted to protect First Amendment and other freedoms of state military members. And as an aside, Liberty Counsel Action, which is a 501c4 entity, invites interested legislators to reach out for help and collaboration on meaningful legislation that will protect cherished liberties and ensure the legislature maintains civilian control over the military power. So that leads us to our fourth W, which is the question of why. And the question here is really twofold. Number one, why is Major Worley fighting this fight? And number two, why is Liberty Counsel providing free legal services to vindicate Major Worley? Major Worley can answer that question really from the complaint here, which is a document to which he has sworn that Major Worley has demonstrated his commitment to the United States and Idaho constitutions, has sacrificed admirably for the nation's future comfort, security, and prosperity, and has served his nation in Idaho with honor and distinction. He has devoted over 2 decades to his sacrificial service and has deployed to fight in the nation's wars. The court should demand that the nation and Idaho return the favor. And this is a quote out of a case that was a 2023 case, U.S. Navy SEALs 1 through 26 versus Biden, which happened to be the COVID vaccine case. And the court there said, our nation asked the men and women in our military to serve, suffer, and sacrifice. But we do not ask them to lay aside their citizenry and to give up the very rights they have sworn to protect. A TRO and preliminary injunction are needed now to prevent the immediate and irreparable injury to Major Worley for the mere exercise of his constitutional rights and to put him back in the status that he had prior to this controversy. The official reprimand in his record, the unconstitutional and unconscionable investigation into his very name, and the impending separation orders are only preventable by immediate injunctive relief and permanent declaratory relief. So that takes us then to our next W, which is when. And I'd just like to see if I can give you a timeline here of how this case unfolded. So let's start with the unlawful Equal Employment Opportunity Commission complaint against Major Worley. That's the EEOC. I'm just going to call it the EO complaint because I can't say that too many times here. So in March of 2023, Major Worley was selected for a 2-year, one-time occasional tour with the Idaho Army National Guard as the commander of the Idaho Army National Guard Recruiting and Retention Battalion. And his orders started July 1 of 2023. Major Worley's first day of work was Wednesday, July 5th, and on Friday, July 7th, his unit had its pre-drill meeting with full-time staff. This is the first time Major Worley met and had any interaction with the complaining guardsman who filed the EO complaint against Major Worley. He shook the complaining guardsman's hand and sat next to him during the meeting, but didn't have any other interactions. Then, 6 days later, on July 13, 2023, the complaining guardsman, a sergeant first class under Major Worley's command, filed the EO complaint against Major Worley. And the EO complaint alleged that Major Worley discriminated against the complaining guardsman due to the complaining guardsman's alleged sexual orientation, and that Major Worley, in the 6 days he was in command, had created a hostile work environment for the alleged offended complaining guardsman. The EO complaint stated that the complaining guardsman felt like he had been discriminated against because of his sexual orientation, and that he had a hostile work environment during the time of 6 July 2023 to current. Now it's interesting, again, that current was the vast span of 6 days. Complaining guardsmen alleged that Major Worley belonged to an, and this is a quote, extremist/hate group, end quote, which created a hostile work environment and caused the complaining guardsman to believe that he was, quote, being discriminated against because of his sexual orientation, end quote. The complaining guardsman took issue with Major Worley's private capacity social media posts that discussed his political campaign for Mayor of Pocatello and State Senate, discussed the positions of his opponents in the Senate race, and discussed the need to return to what Major Worley called truth, decency, and morality. The sole basis for the complaining guardsman's EO complaint against Major Worley was the allegedly offensive, extremist, and hateful views of Major Worley's sincerely held religious beliefs, views, and expressions. The requested relief in the complaining guardsman's EO complaint was to have Major Worley, and here's again a quote, and this was written in all caps in this complaint, immediately removed as my commander, and then to have Major Worley removed from the Idaho Army National Guard so that he never has command authority over anyone again, end quote. So then we move to what happened when this investigation now was begun against Major Worley. So on July 13th was the filing of the EO complaint. On July 18 of that same year, 2023, Major Worley's chain of command ordered him into a meeting in which he was forced to choose between signing a, quote, voluntary resignation, end quote, or facing significant investigation and punishments. Major Worley's command did not bother with the constitutional or legal requirements of due process in such a meeting, denied his right to legal counsel, did not follow Department of Defense procedures, and ignored the requirements to provide Major Worley with a reading of his Article 31 rights as a soldier. So then, under duress, Major Worley capitulated, but immediately rescinded that impermissible procedure upon the advice of counsel and the swift realization that capitulation in the face of blatant injustice would be a stain on his honor and a betrayal of his faith. Major Worley's command accepted the rescinded resignation and immediately followed through with their threatened investigations and administrative punishments. Major Worley was immediately removed from command during the process of investigation. That suspension and removal from command continues to this day, 19 months after the constitutional injury began. On February 1 of 2024, Major Worley's command provided him the report of proceedings by who was referred to as the investigating officer. So the investigating officer found hostile work environment claims to be substantiated, he said, because of Major Worley's, and this is a quote, publicly stated views toward LGBTQ members created a workplace environment for complaining guardsmen where complaining guardsmen reasonably felt intimidated and threatened based upon his sexual orientation. The investigating officer stated in his findings that Major Worley had, quote, well-documented discriminatory views against the LGBTQ community, end quote, that, quote, suggest an inability to uphold the values of equality, respect, and impartiality expected of a company commander, end quote. The investigating officer stated that removing Major Worley from his command on the basis of his religious beliefs, views, and expression was necessary, quote, not only to address the immediate concerns raised by complaining guardsmen, but would also uphold the broader principles of leadership integrity and non-discrimination in the Idaho Army National Guard, end quote. As further support for his findings and recommendations, the investigating officer made it plain that it was Major Worley's, quote, publicly documented political activities, end quote, and that the investigating officer's report would document, quote, many of these, what he called, concerning activities, end quote. Because Major Worley provided a written response but refused to participate in the sham proceedings designed to legitimize the political and religious discrimination already undertaken by defendants in removing him from command, the investigating officer stated that, quote, statements made by Major Worley in the past are included as evidence of his attitudes toward the LGBTQ community, end quote. Now keep in mind, those past statements included the same social media posts from Major Worley that the complaining guardsman had used as the basis of his EO complaint. As part of his factual findings, the investigating officer stated that evidence of Major Worley's creation of a hostile work environment included complaining guardsman's research on Major Worley's social media posts, quote, his political activities and his publicly stated feelings on LGBTQ issues, end quote, that Major Worley was affiliated with an advocacy organization that, which was obviously prior to his time in the full-time Army National Guard, engaged in a, quote, protest at the Pocatello Library, end quote, concerning LGBTQ issues, and that Major Worley had referred to, quote, LGBTQ ideologies as immoral, end quote, and that Major Worley had expressed views, quote, directed at transgender care for children and perceived pornography in libraries, end quote. Talk about a different worldview. All of the investigating officers' findings were based on Major Worley's publicly stated expressions of issues of public importance and on Major Worley's religious speech, and nothing else. The investigating officer further concluded that Major Worley's religious and political views expressed and represented, quote, concerning ideologies, end quote, and, quote, questionable political activities and statements, end quote. The investigating officer further found that Major Worley's conversations with his command revealed his, quote, inner thoughts on the LGBTQ community, end quote, in a way that the investigating officer found, quote, troubling, end quote. The investigating officer then concluded that Major Worley should be, quote, permanently removed from his position, end quote, and recommended the same. Now, it's important here to recognize the sole basis for this recommended removal of Major Worley was that he had engaged in religious expression and speech that the investigating officer found offensive. To make matters worse, as a part of his report to the defendants, the investigating officer recommended that the defendants adopt a policy, which we have referred to in our complaint as the No Christians in Command policy, which was to ferret out what he called, quote, extremists, end quote, in the military by looking at social media profiles of potential command candidates to make sure that there is no, quote, concerning information, end quote, about them. To determine how those candidates portray themselves publicly, to make sure the candidate would be supportive of a, quote, diverse, end quote, group of subordinates, and to get the, quote, full picture, end quote, of the candidate's beliefs, views, and public expression, including whether they had any, quote, concerning ideologies, end quote. The only concerning information about Major Worley, obviously, was, of course, his religious views, beliefs, expression, and speech, and his religious exercise that the complaining guardsman found offensive, and the EO complaint based on that purported offense that the defendants used to investigate, discipline, and remove Major Worley from command. So it was at this point that Attorney Davis Yance, who is a member of Major Worley's legal team in Mr. Yance's capacity of being a specialist in military law, appealed the decision of the investigating officer, and the appeal resulted in Brigadier General Packwood scheduling a review of the decision of the investigating officer. So, in the meantime, a letter was sent to Governor Little dated August 15, 2024, signed by Richard Bast, one of Liberty Counsel's senior litigators, and by me, which explained what had been done to Major Worley by the Idaho National Guard, and that letter then concluded with the following ultimatum. The officer, which we just referred to him generically there, that's Major Worley. The officer's speech indeed expressed rather unremarkable and widely held Christian religious viewpoints and political viewpoints on matters of truth, decency, and morality, including human sexuality. The officer also opposed pernicious practices like the sterilization, sexualization, and mutilation of minor children. Some of the officer's speech was made in the course of political campaigns. All of it is First Amendment protected speech. All was made in the officer's private, non-military capacity. Some of the political positions the officer publicly supported have now become the law of the state of Idaho, or nearly so. Liberty Counsel accordingly adds our voice to those of the Idaho infantry officer and his counsel in requesting that, as Commander-in-Chief, you, the Governor, require the Idaho National Guard to, number one, unsubstantiate the discriminatory investigating officer's findings and recommendations. Number two, reject the no Christians as commanders policy. And number three, require the Idaho National Guard to take all necessary steps to restore the officer's career, which has been harmed by over a year's worth of process as punishment, including dismissing the meritless equal opportunity complaint. We hope to receive a favorable written response by August 30, 2024. If we do not receive a favorable response, Liberty Counsel will conclude we must take additional steps to prevent continuing irreparable harm to the cherished liberties of the Idaho infantry officer. Regrettably, the governor gave no response to that letter whatsoever. So then we look to what happened here as Brigadier General Packwood did a review of what the investigating officer had found. So Brigadier General Packwood, in reviewing the findings of the investigating officer, gave his substituted findings and action plan on September 3, 2024. So that's about half a month after our letter to the governor. So despite Brigadier General Packwood's findings that the essential components of the complaining guardsman's EO complaint against Major Worley were not justified, lacked evidentiary support, and were otherwise unsubstantiated, Brigadier General Packwood found that the suspension of Major Worley from command during the investigation was justified. I don't understand that. Brigadier General Packwood found that the Major's treatment of the complaining guardsman did not constitute unlawful discrimination based on the complaining guardsman's sexual orientation. Brigadier General Packwood also found that Major Worley did not create a hostile work environment because, quote, there is not sufficient evidence that Worley's conduct was because of complaining guardsman's sexual orientation, end quote. Brigadier General Packwood did, however, state that Major Worley's religious beliefs, views, and expressions were, quote, unwelcome and offensive, end quote. Brigadier General Packwood did, however, state that Major Worley's alleged activities did not constitute unlawful harassment because of complaining guardsman's sexual orientation. Specifically, Brigadier General Packwood stated, quote, there is no evidence that Worley's treatment of complaining guardsmen became a condition of employment or that Worley's treatment was either severe or pervasive enough to meet the threshold definition of the technical legal definition of discriminatory harassment. Further, Brigadier General Packwood concluded that, quote, a reasonable person could not conclude that Worley's treatment of complaining guardsmen constituted harassment because of his sexual orientation. So he just shot down every single reason that the investigating officer had come up with as to why Major Worley should be thrown out of the military. Despite finding that all of the basis for complaining guardsmen's equal opportunity complaint against Major Worley were neither merited nor supported by the evidence, Brigadier General Packwood nevertheless concluded that Major Worley's religious beliefs, views, and expressions demonstrated, quote, counterproductive leadership, end quote. That's the first time you've heard that one, right? All of Brigadier General Packwood's findings concerning the, quote, counterproductive leadership, end quote, arose from Major Worley's assertion of his rights, his exercise of his sincerely held religious beliefs, or the expression of his religious views outside of the workplace. In other words, Major Worley's offenses arose not prior to the EO complaint, but as a result of his objections to the EO complaint that was found unsubstantiated and meritless. His objections to the investigation even commencing on the basis of such unfounded and facially unmerited claims, and his unconstitutional treatment in the process of that investigation. So, with those substituted findings, on December 12 of 2024, Major Worley was informed that he was to be permanently separated from active duty with the Idaho National Guard effective within 30 days of the finalization of that paperwork. The separation would result in the loss of his livelihood and the ability to acquire points and promotions. It would also severely limit his ability to receive full-time military employment in the future. And with that, on January 17, 2025, Liberty Counsel filed the lawsuit against the Idaho National Guard and the governor. So in conclusion, I'm going to give you a summary and the bottom line that was aptly posted by an American patriot on Twitter, which, by the way, Major Worley's case has received over 750,000 views. So he says this in his Twitter post. His first bullet point here is, Idaho National Guard purges Christian officer over woke smear. Where's the accountability? Under Biden's administration, a decorated combat veteran, Christian, and former Idaho Senate candidate, Major David Worley, was targeted, investigated, and is now being forced out of the Idaho National Guard, even though the investigation found no wrongdoing. His next bullet point, a fraudulent complaint was used to destroy a man's career. A single complaint was filed 6 days after Worley took command by a homosexual officer who met him twice. The entire complaint was based on Worley's religious and political beliefs, which he expressed as a private citizen. The investigation found no misconduct, no violations, no proof of discrimination. Yet instead of clearing him, they moved to fire him anyway. They told him, "You will resign or we'll make this ugly." Major General Timothy J. Donnellan and Brigadier General James C. Packwood, under Governor Brad Little's leadership, were involved in the decision to strip Worley of command and force him out. They punished him for his Christian beliefs. They ignored their own investigation. They let a baseless complaint destroy his career. Next bullet point, the Guard's disturbing push to purge Christians. The investigation didn't just target Worley, it exposed a broader agenda. Brigadier General Packwood pushed for a policy to scrutinize all command candidates for their Christian beliefs before they are given command. Candidates' social media would be monitored for, quote, concerning ideologies, end quote, and, quote, political activities, end quote. Christian candidates could be reported to the Department of Defense for, quote, extremist activity, and that would follow under what President Biden had as the military regulations. Next bullet point, why was this really done? Before this attack, Worley ran for mayor of Pocatello in 2021 and Idaho State Senate in 2022. During his campaign, he opposed drag queen story hours for kids, fought against obscene books in libraries, took a stand against medical gender transitions for minors. He expressed these views in his private capacity, not in uniform, not on duty. And yet this is what got him targeted. This wasn't about discipline. This was about erasing conservative and Christian voices from military leadership. Next bullet point. Where's Idaho Governor Brad Little? This happened under his watch. He appointed Major General Donnellan and Brigadier General Packwood, the officials responsible for forcing Worley out. He was asked to intervene and refused. Does he stand for religious freedom in the military or not? Silence is complicity. Next bullet point. This cannot happen again. We stand with Major Worley and every patriot who refuses to be silenced. May justice prevail. So if there are any questions, I think we have a period of time to focus on those.
If anyone has any questions, please come up here. We're streaming online, so yeah.
I just wanted to ask, is that coming out?
It's coming
Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to ask if he's not, has he lost any rank in this whole affair yet?
So far, as best I understand it, it is just that he's been removed from his command. Right, and by the filing of our lawsuit, what we have done is to ask the court to rewind back to the time before this controversy happened and put him back in the command at that level. So, exactly, right. So he hasn't lost anything yet, but had it not been for the lawsuit, I think that would have happened. Yes.
Listening to the presentation today, I just have a couple questions before I actually ask a question, of course. But from what I understand, General Packwood, in reviewing this case, refuted the findings of the investigation officer on most of those charges that were brought against him. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. That being the case, under UCMJ, why hasn't this officer been brought up on charges of conduct unbecoming since he made allegations which were later found unbecoming? And an extension of that, why isn't General Packwood under investigation for dereliction? Because they are bound by UCMJ. If I do remember my military justice as well, why is this not happened?
It's just not happened because no one's pulled the trigger on it. And
that's not an excuse.
Yeah. I would tend to agree with you. I mean, that's outside of our bailiwick, but somebody should have eyes on this. You're exactly right. This should never.
You cannot accuse another officer of something that they have not done, not even in allegation.
Mm-hmm.
That is a UCMJ offense.
I agree with you, and I think that's a definite follow-up right there. Yes, thank you. That's a great idea.
It's just an example of how much Biden has destroyed our military.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Unfortunately, being a Christian, I believe we're in the last days. And isn't this one world government, Satanism, Antichrist activity to tear down our country? You know, Trump just said it again as president that Biden stole the election. So Biden's whole administration was illegal. So if these people are acting under Biden, it's all illegal to tear down our country. But I believe it's Satanism, and it's all over the internet.
Wow. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I would. The question here is, how can we help? I guess a couple things. I would encourage you to try to let your friends and family know about this. This is one of those, and you know, we have a great new president, but he can't fix everything immediately. So we've still got a lot of work to do. It's like the door of freedom has been cracked open, and we've got to push through. So in this light, people need to know that this sort of rot is going on, and we need to get rid of it. But if they don't know about it, then there's probably no motivation on their part to do anything about it. So I would just encourage you to share this story with people so that they understand what's going on. And then secondly, as citizens, our legislators are there to be responsive to our concerns. And if we're concerned about this one, this is a great one to just send a short note to your legislator and say, as we talked about earlier, maybe this is one that the Idaho legislature needs to have a committee evaluate and see what went on here. Because this is the closest military to what we as Idaho citizens have, because this is our National Guard. And if we don't take care of it as citizens, the Constitution and the Declaration talk about we the people. That's where the power resides. So if we want to reach out to our legislators and let them know that this is not good, this is not right, and it needs to be looked at, it needs to be fixed, I am hopeful that the legislators would be responsive to that.
So if I heard you correct, you're suing Mr. Little.
In his official
He's-
capacity,
yeah.
he is the commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
The buck stops on his desk.
Who's going to defend? I don't call him governor. Who's going to defend Mr. Little? Is it going to be Raoul?
That's where it looks like it's landing.
So we should probably be doing some letters to Raoul.
That would be another good one, yes. Absolutely.
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
This
Thank
bench
you.
likes to write.
My question is, the senior staff person, I guess I'm assuming he's a staff sergeant, probably had 12, 15 years in the service before he filed his complaint. My question is, has his sexual beliefs ever been brought up before by complaint by him? Has he ever complained about that before? I mean, that's a long time being in the service and never having a complaint, right?
To my knowledge, this is the first and only, and it was after 6 days when he had seen Major Worley 2 times.
Because this is a hit piece. Because they knew his Christian beliefs, where he stands before he even got to command. So they knew what they were going to do. This was set up against him by senior staff, by senior officers, to get rid of him, because they did not want him to bring his Christian beliefs into their society.
So question there was, what is the next step? The lawsuit is in a position right now where we're waiting for answers to come in from legal counsel representing the defendants, which would be the governor in his official capacity and 2 members of the Idaho National Guard in their official capacity. And it's going to be very interesting. If you think about it, we had a Department of Defense under the Biden administration. We have a whole new Department of Defense under the Trump administration. And it is just light years different. So I would hope that there's going to be something that will go back up the chain in the Department of Defense, and that we'll see perhaps that they'll decide that this is one they should just simply resolve and be done with it. And if instead they bow their necks and they spend our tax dollars defending against this thing, that should send a huge message to us about what needs to be done.
I might have missed it, but is there a way to follow this, or is there a website? Is there media where, that we don't just leave here depending on our notes or what we could remember?
One of the nice things about Liberty Counsel is that there is quite a bit of information that is sent out in press releases, and the cases are commented on as they progress. So I would certainly encourage you, if you'd like to just go on the Liberty Counsel website and sign on for update emails, and you'll get a lot of what's going on in this case. And you'll also be probably amazed at what else is still going on in our country that needs to be cleaned up. And as I say, the door of freedom's cracked open, but if we don't push through, who knows what will happen. I think we've got 2 years to really push, and then it's anybody's guess about where we go from there. So let's make hay while the sun shines.
All right. No more questions. Oh, yeah. David, please stand up for everyone. And oh, yeah, nice. All right. Once again, please give it up for both Stephen Smith and Major David Worley. Thank you for coming to today's Capitol Clarity. Please join us next Thursday at noon to hear from Representative Elaine Price and IFF Policy Director Nicholas Kleinworth about a litany of things: sound money, Bitcoin, gold and silver, and debanking of conservatives.